Does the PTFE tube length on your 3D printer affect the stringing or the retraction settings on your 3D printer? I'm going to test it today and find out right here at Filament Friday. Filament Friday is brought to you by these Patreon supporters. I've had a few people tell me that they're getting stringing with my profiles. Now, I don't get it very often, but when I do, it's usually related to the filament or the temperature settings are off. But on this particular machine, I was seeing stringing and it was getting worse. Now, this machine had the original PTFE tube. I left it on. I wanted to see how long it would last. And when the ends of it would burn, I would just pull it out, clip the little burned part off, and stick it back in. So the PTFE tube kept getting shorter and shorter, and the stringing was getting worse. So I wondered if the length of the PTFE tube had an effect on the stringing. So I took the file, put it in another Ender 3, same file, same SD card, but in a different Ender 3 with longer PTFE, printed beautifully, no strings. So I said there must be something here. So my plan was to try a new PTFE tube and cut it to the different lengths and see what the effects were. Let me show you what happened. Here's the original setup. You can see this PTFE tube is incredibly short, barely reaches. It measures 320 millimeters of PTFE. And this is the print I got off it. Actually, this isn't even as bad as what I got later. You can see the stringing in this test print. Here's the other machine that has a much longer PTFE tube. It does have a different extruder, but it has 400 millimeters of PTFE. And when I printed that same file on it, perfectly clean. So I was happy with the results. So this is where I wanted to try the longer PTFE tubing. So here's the original 320 millimeters. I went and got a new piece, and this one is 460 millimeters. I took a ruler and I marked 20 millimeters on the PTFE tube. This is where I'm going to cut it. So I started out with the 460 millimeters, and the print came out beautiful. No stringing, no issues. So then I cut 20 millimeters off, put it back in place, and 440 millimeters, again, no stringing. But at 420, I noticed a real fine line of stringing. So maybe it was working. So then I went to 400, and again, I saw one string across. Very minor, but it was there. But then at 380, disappeared. No stringing. 360, no stringing. 340, no stringing. This is incredible. And back to 320, which the original PTFE tubing was, no stringing. So at that point, I decided to reinstall that original PTFE tube, and look at this. It was actually worse than the first print. This PTFE tube was giving me terrible, terrible stringing. So in the end, I conclude it's not the length. Length really doesn't matter if your PTFE tube is good. Now, because I put a new piece of PTFE tube, the lubrication that a PTFE tube has naturally inside of it does wear out. The new one had it. So I wasn't getting any resistance. I was getting great retraction and no stringing. So if you're getting stringing with my profiles, the first thing I suggest you do is maybe put on a new PTFE tube and see if it goes away. This may also help explain why some people take a little piece of sponge, put a drop of cooking oil on it, clamp it over the filament, and then the filament gets oiled down to the hot end, and they say their stringing goes away. While their PTFE tubing probably is wore out, so they're oiling the inside of the PTFE tubing. I've done this sponge trick in the past. I've had it in previous videos, but I noticed you get a buildup inside the hot end, so I don't do it any longer. But if that oiling trick works for you, maybe you just need a new PTFE tube. I've also had people ask me what length of PTFE tubing should they use on their Ender 3 because they're replacing it with Capricorn or some other brand or just the original. Well, based on these tests, I'd say that 400 to 440 millimeters is a good range, but it doesn't look like you can screw up by going a little too long or a little bit too short, as long as PTFE tubing is good. I hope this helps you out, and if you are seeing stringing with my profiles, please let me know if this fixed it.